Number 15. Children for sale. This image has been floated around the internet for a while, and there's actually a pretty valid story that goes along with it. A couple by the names of Ray and Lucille had been struggling to support their 4 children properly. As times continued getting harder and they were unemployed and evicted from their apartment, in the year 1948, they made a decision that had to be very hard for parents to make. They chose to auction off their children. August 4th, 1948, 6-year-old Lana, 5-year-old Ray, 4-year-old Milton, and 2-year-old Sue Ellen sit on a porch waiting to be purchased. As extreme as this seems as an option, Ray and Lucille assumed their children could be bought by a rich family and be taken care of, and they could use the money to get back on their feet. As you can see, Lucille is turned away sobbing as her children are seemingly unaware of what's to come. Sue Ellen later reunited with her older sister Ray. Milton was adopted by an upper middle class family, and the baby in Lucille's womb at the time of the photo was also adopted out to a very caring family. Although this story has a happy ending for the most part, selling children due to poverty is a terrifying and unrealistic thought that was actually a daunting reality for this family. Number 14. Tiny handcuffs. When now 40-year-old Shane Murray was a child visiting family in Kansas, his grandfather gave him a very strange gift. Murray's grandfather presented him with a shoebox, and inside the box was a very rusted and very old pair of handcuffs. Even more particular, the handcuffs were half the size of a normal pair. His grandfather joked that the cuffs were used to take young Native American children to school. He held on to those tiny cuffs, rarely ever touching them, for about 30 years. However, Murray claims that the cuffs would move around his home on their own. He would find them laying out in the open without having ever disturbed them. He claims that they began to speak to him in a way. Every time he passed the Haskell Indian Nations University, which he lived near, he would think of the cuffs and could imagine them saying, "Take us home." Murray eventually gave into these haunting thoughts and turned the cuffs over to the university's cultural center, where he learned the truth behind them was that they were actually likely used on children during the assimilation of Native Americans. After Murray gave away the cuffs, he claims to have slept for over 2 days, finally feeling the huge burden off of his shoulders. Number 13. Satan's Dungeon. This photo surfaced on the web a couple years back, and rumors began floating with it that it was the location for a group of Satanists to perform sacrifices and other rituals. The wall reads, "Satan, I love you," in German. The truth behind the photo isn't as creepy as we'd like to think, but it's still very unsettling. This is actually an underground bunker that was used during World War II by German Nazis. The underground system stretches for miles and is very popular amongst ghost hunters, historians, and teenagers looking to get spooked. Although the satanic stuff is likely a joke, there have been reports of real ghostly and evil activities going on in these bunkers. There were likely thousands of Nazis that died bloody deaths in these underground rooms. If you're a believer in spirits getting stuck on this earthly realm, then you can guarantee these hateful spirits are still wandering the halls of these bunkers. Number 12. The Amityville Child. In November of 1974, Ronald Defoe Jr. killed his entire family in a colonial-style home located in Amityville, Long Island. Roughly a year later, a family of 5 moved into the home, but only one stayed for a month before fleeing, as they claimed to have been haunted by powerful spirits. This tragedy sparked a series of novels and movies following the investigations, and especially the paranormal possibilities. This particular photo has been titled Amityville Ghost Boy, and is one of the more popular pieces of evidence associated with the Amityville investigations. An investigator that was working with professional demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren, said the photo was taken at random and the child that appears was not anywhere on the premises. Many claim that it is the ghost of one of the Defoe children, while others stick to a claim that it's a visual apparition of demonic energy. Regardless of who or what is in the photo, It's one of the creepiest and popular ghost photos in history, and only adds to the mysterious nature of the happenings inside the Amityville horror house. Number 10. TV message. In 2015, someone uploaded this photo of their TV with a story claiming they were browsing the channels when their TV froze up and this message was stuck on the screen before it suddenly turned off and back on. Well, some people claim that this photo is either faked or the TV just froze up at a very convenient time. Others seem very convinced that this was a message caused by a paranormal spirit or even a demon. In the world of the paranormal, it's a pretty common idea that spirits have the power to possess and control electronics such as phones, TVs, and computers. Although these types of hauntings are a little rarer, they have been recorded a few times. It would be great to know more about the story behind this photo and the person it was affecting. Number 9. Nail scratches in Auschwitz. The Holocaust is something that comes up a lot when you're on the topic of disturbing because it's one of the most disturbing things in our history as humans. The complete genocide of over 11 million people is not just a blemish on the face of our history, it's a scar, as if the thought of such a mass number of people dying isn't enough. Remember the fact that before they died, they were shipped off to concentration camps, which were only a step above hell. These camps starved, tortured, and dehumanized their victims. All over the world and internet, we see sick examples of what happened within the fences of these camps. From photos to artifacts to victims sharing their experience, there's never been a doubt in history of just how sick these camps were. This photo was taken from the concentration camp Auschwitz in Poland. While this photo was taken in 2004, it still speaks in the same volumes as it did the day after Auschwitz was discovered by troops. This photo was taken in one of the several gas chambers on site, and as you can tell, it is of fingernail scratches along the wall. Camp Nazis would stuff hundreds of people into the relatively small chambers, completely naked, with the promise of a refreshing shower, only to gas them to death. These nail scratches are the last hopeless attempt at a survival in a world composed of pure evil and hatred. Number 8. Home. On the topic of the Holocaust, here's a photo of a young girl drawing her home. Of the millions killed during the genocide, the highest death toll goes to the children. When they arrived at the camps, they were often sent directly to the gas chambers if they were too young to do labor or offer any specialized skills. In fact, when Auschwitz was liberated, of the 9,000 people freed from the confines of the barbed wire cages, only 450 of them were children. Most of the children saved from this point had been born in captivity, or at least spent the majority of their lives there. This young girl, Chernobyl, had grown up in the camp and was very mentally disturbed and not developed properly for her age. This photo was taken in a special home in Poland that aimed to help these disturbed children. Chernobyl had been asked to draw her home, and these scribblings was what she illustrated. Furthermore, the look in her eyes as she peers at the photographer tells a whole story that her upsetting drawing doesn't even begin to cover. There's no word on this young girl and how her life turned out, though we can assume she was haunted by dark memories of a childhood for the rest of her life. These disturbing souvenirs of the Holocaust travel the earth and float on the web as a reminder to never let the past repeat itself. Number 7. Cult Town. This photo was taken on the island of Hiroshima in Japan, where over 1,750 volcanoes erupted that left the island covered in ash and air much too thick to breathe without a gas mask. Before all of its residents were pushed out in 2000, everyone was forced to wear gas masks nearly 24/7. This led to some pretty creepy yet amazing photos. Crowds for parties all adorning their masks, bride and groom doing the same, and school children running on the ashy playground with their masks strapped on tight. This town surely looks like something out of a horror film, and the real-life horrors of the town are even worse now. There are virtually no residents left on the island, and the town is what resembles a post-apocalyptic standstill, with a dusty layer covering the cars in the middle of the roads and the entirely abandoned homes. It's truly a ghost town, with only memories of a once thriving society. Number 6. Man begging for his life. The 2002 Gujarat riots were a series of very violent events over a 3-day period that occurred in the West Indian state of Gujarat. For several months following this event, there were even more riots that broke out against Muslims. These riots resulted in the death of at least 790 Muslims alone. This particular photo was taken of a man in the crowd of a violent outbreak, begging for his life. There was never any more information on this man's life and whether or not he was a victim of the tragic riots, but his expression is enough to fill the viewer with a sense of the events surrounding this time period. Aside from the man being beaten and shot to death, the women and children were also victims of gang rape and torture, so it's likely that this man was not just a common victim about to be shot, but had also lost most of, if not all of his family before his life came to the point of desperation. Number 5. Chernobyl's elephant foot. In the town of Pripyat, Ukraine, a nuclear power plant exploded and fatal levels of radioactive particles were released into the air. While this disaster happened in 1986, the town is still deserted, frozen in time, and deemed unsafe. One of the most interesting photos to come from Chernobyl is of a mass known as the elephant's foot, which is a mass of nuclear fuels, melted metal, sand, and concrete. Many scientists and even very stupid explorers have dived into the room that contains this mass. It is said that only 3 minutes within 100 feet of the foot will cause severe sickness and possibly even death. However, human curiosity and humanity's need for scientific solutions keep people coming back to test the glob and take photos of it. Scientists believe that testing this deadly foot of radioactivity will lead to discoveries in how to combat fatal nuclear chemicals and how to renew the town known as Chernobyl. Number 4. Travis Alexander. This young man was dating a woman named Jodi Arias. Alexander and Arias had been together for about 2 years. During this time they moved in together and even planned to get married not far down the road. On June 4th, 2008, Travis Alexander was murdered while in the shower. He was stabbed about 29 times, his throat was slit, and he had been shot once in the head. During the investigation, there was evidence of Arias calling his phone several times throughout the night and not being able to get through. A damaged digital camera was also found that included sexual images of Alexander and Arias. This chilling photo of Alexander in the shower the night of his death and an image of what was declared to be his corpse lying on the shower floor. There was also a bloody handprint on the shower wall that included both Arias and Alexander's DNA. Arias finally claimed that she killed him in self-defense after a fight about the camera being damaged. However, this was the 4th or 5th variation of her story, which led to a lack of validity, and an autopsy showed that it was very unlikely Alexander was the attacker, as he had many defense wounds. The autopsy also showed the gunshot occurred after death, which helped to rule self-defense out. Through a trial that lasted until 2013, nearly 5 years after the homicide took place, Arias was found guilty. This photo of Travis in the shower is the last photo of him alive. The confusion, surprise, and blissful ignorance on his face is pretty chilling when you consider what's coming his way. Number 3. Shirley Ann Bridgeford. In March 1958, when she was merely 24 years old, Shirley Ann Bridgeford came in contact with a sick man that would become known as the Glamour Girl Killer. Shirley met Harvey Glattman through a dating service known as Patty Sullivan's Lonely Hearts Club. Shirley and Glattman, going by the alias George Williams, made plans to go out on a date. When Glattman arrived to pick up the young and beautiful Shirley Ann, he decided to change plans on her. He told her he wanted to take her on a romantic drive around the countryside. Shirley sheepishly agreed, and Glamour took her to a very remote area in the country where he wasted no time beginning his devilish scheme. He ordered her to get out of the car and strip down. Before strangling her, he raped and photographed her. He even took a few more photos of her lifeless corpse before he left the scene of the crime. This photo was taken just before he raped her, and there are more gruesome photos readily available all over the internet. Shirley was the second of Glamour's 3 victims, who he raped and murdered from 1957 to 1958. He was finally arrested in October of 1958 and later executed through asphyxiation by gas in California roughly a year after his arrest. Number 2. Columbine School Picture. The Columbine High School shooting is one of the most notorious mass shootings in history. This tragically pretty much sparked the disturbing trend of mass shootings and also led to a major lockdown in school security. When it comes to disturbing and tragic things, the Columbine massacre always makes its way onto our lists. Maybe it's because we want to learn more about the horrifying truths of this world. Or maybe it's because it's a generally popular subject. People have dedicated their lives to studying the shooters, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. This photo surfaced not long after the tragedy struck. It was taken not long before the teens overtook the school and went on their killing spree. The most unsettling thing about this photo is that whoever saw this first probably assumed it was just a couple of kids being silly in a school picture, until a few weeks later when they took the lives of 13 people. Number 1. Hiroshima Shadows. In 1945, America dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. At least 80,000 people died instantly, 35,000 were injured, and in a year's time a total of 60,000 more innocent people would die from the after effects such as cancer. When this massive bomb, ironically named Little Boy, blasted a bright flash of death, buildings that didn't incinerate immediately were charred. If someone was standing in front of a wall at the time, the radiation would not fully reach that wall, and the dark outline of a person could be seen. These shadows still remain in some places, a macabre reminder of lives once lived, before a huge blast wiped out thousands with hardly a second's warning. These shadows are history's photos that will force the viewer to think of the figure standing. Was it a man, a woman, maybe even a child? Did they know it was coming? As quick as the flash of a camera, their lives were stolen from them, with hardly any pieces left behind. Got an idea for a top 15 video? Be sure to submit it at top15s.net/submit. Be sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching.